I don't see Jesus crossing the road, but even if Jesus did cross the road, I don't think it would be with the intent of violence. I don't ever see Jesus throwing a fist. Jesus forgave the people that crucified him. But one of the comments I distinctively remember on Facebook said, yeah, but Jesus didn't have a wife and children.
Okay.
And so there was something like, I don't need to follow Christ's example in this because this man was threatening children, threatening my wife. And so that excused my violence. All right, Bill, here we go. Episode 9 of the You've Heard It Said podcast.
Jared, we're back.
Still making it happen.
That's right.
All right. Well, tonight we've got a little different episode for you. This is an episode that I just have not been able to get away from. For whatever reason, the algorithms online have discovered that this triggers me and I can't stop seeing posts about it or people writing about it or news articles on it. And so I just have been swimming in it. But I asked Bill if he'd heard about it, and Bill has not heard much about this or anything.
Yeah, sorry. We don't listen to the same feeds, apparently.
Bill's algorithm is full of righteous and holy material, content about devoting oneself to Jesus and deep study of the Word of God.
In the King James.
James. The original King James format.
That's right.
Okay, but for me, I wanted to talk about this fellow who's been in the news a lot lately, Pastor Tony Spell. And apparently, he's kind of a controversial pastor. He's been around for a while. Maybe most of America is just now hearing about him because of his recent viral clip that showed up online. So if you've not heard about Pastor Tony Spell, you're probably not missing much, honestly, in my opinion. But if you have heard about him, what's been interesting is he's had a ton of support over this last controversy. And so I think the best way, Bill, for us to start into this is we're going to actually do a little bit of like a YouTube reacts type thing where I am going to show this clip to you for the first time, and then we will talk through our thoughts on Pastor Tony Spell. So,
okay.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. Let me share this with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which one's Tony? Which?
Here we go.
At approximately 9 a.m., I'm out on the church parking lot. There I'm working on one of our Sunday school buses. We have a large bus fleet. The individual across the street, one of the men across the street, is walking up and down the shoulder. He said, "Tony, I'm going to rape your wife. I'm going to rape all of your grandchildren." And he said, "The next time you go out of town, I'm going to kill them. And what the F are you going to do about it?" Our church represents 27 nationalities. Every nationality that comes to this church comes for a safe place of refuge, a place of worship. They are constantly stalked by these individuals across the street. There's not a person that's come to this church that's standing behind me in this meeting today who hasn't been called the racial slurs of the N-word. I will not allow a man to murder my children when I'm gone. The next time you leave, I'm going to kill your family. What the F are you going to do about it?
Well, all right. There it is, Bill. And that was a bit chopped up, so it's a little bit hard to see it straight through.
So what's your point, Jared? Why is that controversial? I don't get where you're going with that.
Well, okay. Let's unpack this. It's controversial on several levels. One, there is a lot of Christians who feel like victims. They feel persecuted. They feel like the world is out to get them. And and maybe they're not wrong. And so you hear this pastor talking about these threats on him and on his church. Some of the most vile things I could think of would be to threaten killing and raping of children. I mean, I really can't think of lower lows. Again, we are hearing one side of the story, but let's assume those threats are valid. They're serious. And so there's a lot of questions around this about why have not the police intervened. In fact, the pastor says he's reportedly filed many complaints against this family and nothing has been done. So there's some national frustration about the politics of police intervention. When do they get involved? How, to what extent? And I think that is kind of some of the foundational level of the disgruntledness felt through this whole instance. So let's just talk about that for a second. What are your thoughts and feelings about the police within America? I know it's really vague, but do you how do you feel our police are doing? I don't know. Do you think, like, when you think of the term like a police officer, does that invoke positive emotions in you, negative emotions? Do you feel proud, or would you feel fear? Because I think we have the whole spectrum in our country. So let's just maybe you and I talk about for a minute how we perceive police intervention in our country.
I think you and I can only speak as white males, right? And for me, I think that a majority of the police officers are there because they chose a vocation where they want to serve people. Are there exceptions to that rule? Absolutely. But overall, I've never been abused. I've never been harassed. But again, this is coming from, a white male's opinion. And I may have a completely different opinion if I was of a different race or, what may have been faced. Now, where was this taking place? Where, do you know?
Okay. It was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay. So the
So
South.
contextually very, very different environment than either.
And, again, if we're accepting everything that he said at face value, he did mention that everybody in his congregation has been threatened by this group of people that are across the street, not just this one individual that he ended up attacking. And, what can the police do about threats? I mean, is that a freedom of speech issue? I mean, maybe the police haven't done anything because they can't do anything. Maybe they can't intervene for somebody who's doing, just making threats if they haven't actually acted on that. But at the same time, is it appropriate for that pastor to have responded the way he did to a threat that maybe he's heard this threat for months or years and it's never actually been acted out? And I think there's a difference between someone yelling threats at you and someone actually trying to carry out what that threat is. I mean, I know that for me personally, if I felt that my family, my children, my wife, my grandchildren were threatened by an individual, I could potentially respond the same way. But somebody yelling across the street at you and saying those things, is that really a threat? And I don't think so. Even though you mentioned how vile it is, people can say whatever they want to, right? Is he going to act on them? More than likely not. People who are in high political positions get death threats all the time, but nobody usually acts on them. So anyway, so for me, to answer your original question, we're obviously jumping around quite a bit. I mean, it was kind of sharing my feelings from just what I watched for the first time. But I believe that my experience has been that a majority of the police officers that I've had any dealings with were choosing to be there because they wanted to serve people and be fair. And again, there's exceptions to the rule, I'm sure. And I probably never experienced that because of my background, but that's my feeling. How about you?
Well, I was at a men's coffee this morning. So we had about 5 guys, just having coffee before the day gets going. And we're waiting for our drinks to get announced that they're ready. And one of the drinks got announced and it was a green, like lime green soda. And we go, hey, Scott, is that your drink? And he looks over and goes, lime green? I'd never drink that. And then a police officer that was in the room gets up to go get his drink. And we realize that he ordered the lime green soda. And all of us kind of look at each other like, well, we got no problem with lime green sodas. That's great. There was like a little hint of fear, a little like respect. for the man with the gun, and also like is this going to be an issue? We hope he didn't hear us, kind of thing. So all that to say, I share similar responses to you. I have never had issues with U.S. police, but I've had some run-ins during missions trips and things overseas where I haven't always been treated favorably by those in authority. It's interesting. I've had some run-ins in Mexico where it's culturally accepted that the police force in certain parts of Mexico are not paid a livable wage, and they are expected to compensate their wage by collecting payoffs in lieu of tickets. And so I've experienced that firsthand. My dad ran a stop sign one time, and he learned the hard way. So, yeah, it's a different animal, and I get what you were saying about like how sometimes people say vile things that we would want the police to intervene on, but yet we live in a country that has First Amendment, says free speech, and so maybe there should be some kind of documented way of giving warnings. Like, hey, we recognize the threat you made. You have a legal right to make this threat, but it's been recorded. I could see some benefit to something like that versus, look, we've got too much going on. We can't deal with this. We're just going to ignore that it ever happened because it's not really something we can take action on. So regardless, that's where we're at. And maybe there's some truth in this instance, but back to the actual case at hand, you get this pastor marching across 4 lanes of traffic. It sounded to me like the younger male was yelling for help in the beginning. And maybe I heard that wrong, but then I believe the pastor said something along the lines of, I'm going to break your neck, before he even approaches the man. But what has been overwhelmingly clear on Facebook is that the standard in this situation was the young man threw punches first. And so every action of the pastor after that is permitted because the young man threw the first punch. And I think legally there might be some truth to that. But where I wonder is, as Christians, how do we look at this? I mean, Jesus Christ said, if someone hits you on the cheek, you turn your other cheek to him. And so do we take that literally? Or is this meant more of an allegory? Or how does it apply to this situation? Or for what reasons would this be different or not different? What do you think about that?
So I don't think Jesus' instruction was meant to be taken literally, right? Because if you do take it literally, then what Jesus told you was you wait until they throw 2 punches and then you're good to go, right? I mean, hit him on the right cheek, and then once he's hit you on the left cheek, you've fulfilled what Jesus said, and then you're okay to go about your business, right?
That's what you take away from that.
That's what Jesus said, right? Turn the other cheek.
But you're adding, wait, because you're adding. You're saying, okay, if he hits you on the left, you turn your right, then you punch the guy.
I'm saying if you take what he said literally, that's how you could interpret it. I'm not saying, I don't think that's what Jesus meant at all, right? But again, to me, could the pastor have just stayed on the other side of the street and just ignored him? And in my mind, that's probably how I would have responded. I mean, this is just a guy who's making noise across the street, and he's not over in my territory threatening me or my family or my wife. He's just making a lot of noise.
Now, let me ask you this. Does it change? Apparently, this guy's been making threats for 6 years. Does that change things for you or no?
So for me, if he's got a track record of making threats for 6 years and not acting on them, I mean, for me, that says they're just empty threats and I could just easily ignore them. Oh yeah, that guy, he's always making threats. He's done that for years. He doesn't,
that lowers the bar.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you what,
for
most people on Facebook, that raised the bar. They were like, oh, this has been going on for 6 years. Pastor finally had enough. It's time for action.
So why does the action have to be violent?
Because some even said slow to anger. What's that passage?
Be quick to listen, slow to anger.
Quick to listen, slow to anger. And they're like, oh, 6 years. He was slow to anger.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 years. And he finally had enough. And so I'm telling you, Bill, overwhelmingly, his actions were supported by people.
All right, so let's just say Jesus was across the street and this guy was yelling at him. How would you think, on what we know about the character of Christ, how do you think he would have responded to that. I mean, we're supposed to be imitators of Christ. Paul made that very clear, right? So we're to be imitators of Christ. So how would he have responded to that? Would he have, with 6 years of threat, would he have finally said, okay, that's enough, I can't take anymore, and gone over and, pummeled the guy? I did happen to notice in the video that, the young guy seemed like he threw the first punch, and maybe he felt validated. Yeah, first couple. Yeah. And then, but
you don't see Jesus coming across the road, and
I don't see Jesus being represented in his actions. I mean, I don't look at that last part of the video where he's literally sitting on top of the guy, holding him down and beating him.
Okay. We'll get to that one, but let me back up on the Jesus thing, because I have spent way too much time reading comments on this, and I agree with you, Bill. Personally, I don't see Jesus crossing the road, but even if Jesus did cross the road, I don't think it would be with the intent of violence. I don't ever see Jesus throwing a fist. I mean, Jesus forgave the people that crucified him. Like, how do you have a higher standard than that? You can't. So, but one of the comments I distinctively remember on Facebook said, "Yeah, but Jesus didn't have a wife and children."
Okay.
And so there was something like, I don't need to follow Christ's example in this, because this man was threatening children, threatening my wife. And so that excused my violence, that permitted my violence in this, because, well, I have to protect my wife and children. In fact, a lot of the comments on this said, man's got to protect his flock. Like somehow beating this kid down was protecting your flock, or protecting your wife, or protecting your children.
Okay, so do you think this kid yelling across the 4-lane highway was a direct threat to his wife and children?
Well, that's the thing. He's been yelling for 6 years. Is it a threat? Is it not a threat? I think best case scenario, people say, yeah, this was an actual threat that needed to be dealt with. And so you get a lot of support for him, because people want to see threats dealt with. They're tired of living in a world where people are threatened all the time and there's no action taken because of whatever reasons, politics or whatever. But I guess for me, I just feel like the way of Jesus is such a higher bar than this. Like, personally, when I look at the life of Christ, I see a man who was completely pacifistic, not weak, not a doormat, but refused to respond in violence to another person. So that's, for me, the challenge. Now, my wife told me, as I was preparing all this and thinking through this and spending too much time on Facebook, that she thought if this actually happened to me and my family, that I would respond much differently than how I wished I would respond, that I would do something about it. And she probably is right. Like, I don't know if I would have passed that test. So I am wrestling through some internal thoughts there. At what point would I respond for my family? But even more than that, like you brought up, Bill, it seemed he went beyond what was needed in the moment. He had the kid pinned on the ground. He's punching him. Some people have counted somewhere between 26 and 30 punches. And then as he got up, he kicked the kid in the head one more time.
Wow.
So I don't know, man. This is an action that's been celebrated by most of the Christians online. How do we process this?
Here's one more thing for you. So Jesus, I think this is shortly either after or at the end of the Last Supper, right? Knowing that he's going to be taken. He says to his disciples in Luke, but now if you have a purse, take it, also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. And then the disciples say to him, see, Lord, here we have 2 swords. And Jesus said, that's enough. And that's a verse that sticks out in my mind. And it seems to stand alone compared, because it's not written in any of the other Gospels. You don't see that part. And I think that shows we talk about Jesus being both God and man, right? And I think we're seeing the humanity of Jesus at that point, because he knows what's coming. And there's a part of him that thinks maybe they need to be able to defend themselves. Why else would he ask that they have a sword with them, or 2 swords? What's your take on that?
It's a tough one, Bill. So it makes me want to go look up the Greek. I know that in Ephesians 6, when they talk about the armor of God, they describe the sword. I think it's the sword of righteousness.
Sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God.
Thank you. Yeah, sword of the Spirit. That the Greek word used for sword there is not an offensive sword, but a defensive sword. Like a small, short sword, almost like a dagger,
Right.
So I want to go. I want to go look at the Greek in Luke. I have not read that passage for a long time, so I'm not sure how I feel about Jesus telling disciples to go buy swords. That bothers me. I have to unpack that. What are you? Where are you coming from? What have you been taught on this one? Let me punt it back to you.
Okay,
Okay.
let me just tell you, this is usually a text that most churches ignore. It's one of those things they just
Yeah.
read over it, right? That's not
Yeah.
really even there, because then we don't have to address it. But it's there, right? And
Yeah.
I guess for me, I've always felt like, again, I felt like that was part of Jesus' humanity, and what he was, when he was praying earnestly for God to take this from him, right? He did not want to have to go through the crucifixion, and he was praying earnestly that, and I think he was so burdened with that. Maybe this was one of the ways in his mind he was, trying to figure out what he was going to have to do. But in the end, then, we read that Peter takes the sword out, cuts off a servant's ear, and Jesus puts it back on. So it's almost like Jesus goes the other way when the rubber meets the road, right? I mean, when they actually are confronted and they are in danger, Jesus doesn't instruct his disciples, okay, guys, pull out the two swords you have. Let's go for it. He does the exact opposite. But at the same time, I felt, as a father and as a husband, that my role was to protect my family in the event that they were threatened. But for me, and again, I wasn't there. I haven't been there for the last 6 years. I don't know, but my inclination for some guy yelling at me from across the road would have been just to ignore him and then not go across the street to confront him. And the interesting thing is apparently that's what this pastor's been doing for the last 6 years, if it's been going on for the last 6 years, because this is the first instance when he actually goes across the road and confronts him. And apparently what he's done over the last 6 years hasn't been an issue, other than the guy continues to lob threats across the 4-lane highway. But if that's the extent of it, in my mind, I would just ignore him. So I guess I wouldn't feel like that would be a threat to my family, somebody yelling that across, even that vile stuff that he was supposedly yelling, because he's never acted on it before and it's been 6 years. But at the same time, if I felt like if I found this guy going through my house looking for my kids, that would be a whole different story, I think. And I would absolutely do anything to protect my family and wife from that type of violence.
All right, man. Well, I feel challenged in this moment. I think the theologian in me wants to advocate and personally promote for total pacifism, but the practical father in me, human being in me, I find myself maybe more relating, especially in the passage you raised, to, I don't know if you ever done like karate or you've heard of any of these like jujitsu guys or something, and they talk about having the ability, strength, and force to end a fight if needed, but never go further than is needed, like the restraint and discipline to never go further than needed. And I find myself wondering if perhaps maybe that is actually the way of Christ. You have the sword in case you need to demonstrate that you're not the meek doormat, walk over my family and the people I love kind of person, but you also have the wisdom, skill, and talent to say, I will do what I need to protect my family and no more. I could get behind that. Perhaps that balance is what's missing in this argument, because I tell you, Bill, if you got online, you would find, surprise, surprise, polarization in this whole thing of this guy should have gone further. He's justified in all he did. And others who saying, how could he? This is completely, out of line. A man of God should never raise his fists. So maybe
Can I just say, though, I think,
yeah,
I don't think we should label them that quote unquote as a man of God. I think the response from him should have been the same, whether he was a pastor, whether he was a fireman, whether he was a policeman, whether he was a janitor. The response from Christians should be the same. It doesn't make, in my mind, it doesn't make any difference whether he was a pastor. He was in a leadership role, and his congregation saw how he responded. And my understanding is the congregation was pretty strongly in support of how he responded. But our goal should be the same as a pastor's goal, and that's to be like Christ. So whether you're a pastor or whatever your role or career is, I think that's how everybody should respond. And I think I think Jesus was a complete pacifist when it came to him being arrested and him being whipped. And I mean, he just took it, right? And maybe that's the example we're supposed to have. If we're being persecuted for our faith, maybe we're supposed to yield to that. But maybe if other people, like our families, our children, our wives, maybe then we take a different role, and the role that maybe God charged us with in terms of being husbands and fathers and protecting our family and our wives. So there may be a slight differentiation there when you're talking about it happening just to you versus happening to your family and your role then as a husband or father.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think there's a clear biblical example of Jesus having to defend someone else from physical violence.
Right.
I mean, maybe the verse you raised is the closest. Like, hey, be ready. Have a sword just in case,
or two.
Or two. So I think I'm with you on this one. This is one I'm going to keep chewing on. But at the very least, as we kind of wrap up this episode, I think we would both agree that any kind of pride in celebrating your beatdown of another human being,
right,
is not the way of Jesus.
I agree.
Because I'm not sure if we said it in the podcast, but you and I talked about it for sure offline. The next Sunday sermon, he said, the Bible says to lay hands on the sick.
Yeah.
And I laid hands on the sick. And then everybody kind of erupts. And, there is kind of a celebration of the victor, of the stronger. That's clearly, as we wrestle through this, not the way of Jesus.
Well, and again, just think if Jesus was sitting in that congregation when he said that, would he have been laughing along with him, or would he have been embarrassed? And I mean, what would Jesus' response have been when he addressed, well, I was laying hands on him, because that's not how the Bible talks about laying hands on people,
All right. Well, a difficult, interesting episode for us, Bill. And again, as always, please, guys, like, comment, and subscribe. We are trying to build up a subscriber base, so we would love to hear from you. If you think we were way off on this one, if you have passionate feelings about it, leave a comment, and we do read those. We'd love to get back to you.
Direct those towards Jared.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Throw all the negative comments my way, and all the praise towards Bill.
There you go.
All right, guys, episode 9 of the You've Heard It Said podcast. We are signing off. Thank you so much for tuning in and staying with us. We will see you guys next week.